The morning light streaming through my apartment window felt almost accusatory as I stared at the text message that had just shattered whatever fragile peace I'd managed to construct over the past 3 months. $47,000. 72 hours. You know what happens if you don't pay. Marco. My hands trembled as I set my phone down on the desk cluttered with photography equipment. My camera sat there like a silent witness to my failures. The Nikon D850 I'd saved for 2 years to buy, back when I still believed I could make it as a fine art photographer. Back when my father was still alive and his gambling debts hadn't become my inheritance. I was 24 years old, and I was drowning. My cramped studio apartment in the warehouse district smelled like the coffee I'd made an hour ago and forgotten to drink. Traffic sounds filtered up from the street below, mixing with sirens that reminded me exactly what kind of neighborhood I lived in. The kind where loan sharks like Marco operated without fear of consequences. The kind where young women disappeared when they couldn't pay their debts and nobody asked too many questions. I pulled up my laptop, navigating to the job search sites I'd bookmarked weeks ago when the situation started looking truly desperate. My last gallery submission had been rejected with the kind of form letter that didn't even pretend to be personal. Your work shows technical proficiency, but we're looking for something more commercially viable at this time. Translation: your haunting black and white portraits of forgotten people in forgotten places don't sell to the kind of clients who can afford our gallery prices. I scrolled past photography positions, freelance gigs that would take months to pay out, teaching jobs that required credentials I didn't have. Then I saw it. Executive Secretary, Viterii Holdings. Excellent salary, comprehensive benefits, immediate start available. The salary listed was nearly double what I'd been making from the scattered photography jobs I'd managed to book. More than enough to handle the debt, if I could just survive long enough to earn it. My artistic eye caught the details others might have missed. The address was in the financial district, the building that glass and steel monument to wealth I'd photographed once from street level, drawn to the way afternoon light turned the windows into sheets of gold. The company name carried weight in the city, though I wasn't entirely sure why. Something about real estate and import businesses, and the kind of influence that made city officials nervous. This is insane, I whispered to my empty apartment. I'm a photographer, not a secretary. But my finger was already clicking the application link, because what choice did I have? Marco's collectors didn't care about my artistic dreams or my credential deficiencies or the fact that answering phones and managing schedules would slowly kill the creative part of my soul. They cared about $47,000, and they cared about it in 72 hours. I filled out the application with the same attention to detail I brought to composing a perfect shot. Education, work history, skills that translated from organizing photo shoots to organizing executive calendars. By the time I hit submit, my coffee had gone completely cold and the morning light had shifted, no longer accusatory, but simply indifferent. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Ms. Chen? This is Patricia Moreno from Viterii Holdings. We received your application this morning and would like to bring you in for an interview. Would 2 p.m. today work for you? I looked at the clock. It was barely 9 a.m. They worked fast. Yes, I said, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. 2 p.m. works perfectly. Excellent. Dress is business professional. We'll see you then. She hung up before I could ask any of the dozen questions suddenly crowding my mind. I spent the next 4 hours preparing like I was about to photograph royalty. Showered until my skin was pink and raw, trying to wash away the feeling of walls closing in. Selected my most professional outfit, a navy pencil skirt that fell just above my knee, and a white silk blouse buttoned to a respectable height. Pulled my dark hair into a neat low bun, applied minimal makeup with the precision I usually reserved for setting up lighting equipment. The woman in my bathroom mirror looked competent, polished, ready. She didn't look like someone whose father had gambled away her future before drinking himself to death. She didn't look like someone who'd spent the last 3 years trying to build a photography career while drowning in inherited debt. She didn't look desperate. Good. That was the only shot I had at this. The subway ride downtown took 40 minutes, giving me plenty of time to research on my phone. Viterii Holdings owned commercial real estate throughout the city, along with several upscale restaurants and what the website vaguely termed import consultancy services. The CEO, Roman Viterii, was 32 according to the brief bio I found. Stanford educated, took over the family business at 28 after his father's retirement. What the corporate website didn't mention, but what I pieced together from careful searches and whispered internet forum discussions, was that the Viterii name carried a different kind of weight in certain circles. The kind that made people's voices drop when they spoke it. The kind that meant his buildings never had permit issues, his restaurants never failed health inspections, and his business rivals tended to suddenly relocate to other cities. I should have been more concerned. Should have questioned why the salary was so high, why they wanted to interview me the same day I applied, why 3 previous secretaries had supposedly quit within 6 months. But Marco's text message burned in my mind like a brand, and I needed this job more than I needed to be cautious. The Viterii Holdings building occupied an entire block in the financial district, all glass and steel reaching 30 stories into the afternoon sky. I'd photographed it before from the street, fascinated by the way it seemed to swallow light and spit it back out transformed. Now I was walking into it, past the marble and chrome lobby with security that rivaled airport TSA. I showed my driver's license at 3 different checkpoints before reaching the executive elevator that would take me to the 28th floor. My stomach did a small flip as the elevator climbed, but I told myself it was just first interview nerves. Nothing more. The executive floor was hushed luxury. Thick carpet muffled footsteps. Original artwork lined walls painted in tasteful grays and creams. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city sprawling below, and my photographers I automatically cataloged the angles, the light, the way wealth translated into space and silence. A woman in her 50s approached, her burgundy suit impeccable, her smile professional but genuinely warm. Nora Chen? I'm Patricia Moreno, Director of Operations. Thank you for coming in on such short notice. Thank you for seeing me so quickly. Mr. Viterii appreciates efficiency. She gestured toward a seating area. Let's talk for a few minutes before I take you to meet him. The interview was surprisingly straightforward. Patricia asked about my organizational skills, my ability to handle confidential information, my comfort level with demanding executives. I answered honestly, drawing on my experience coordinating photo shoots with difficult clients, managing complicated schedules, keeping track of details that could make or break a project. You're a photographer, Patricia said, glancing at my resume. That's an unusual background for an executive assistant. I need stable income, I said simply. And I'm good at managing complex situations. The skills translate. Something flickered in her expression. Respect, maybe. Or recognition of desperation barely concealed beneath professional veneer. The position requires absolute discretion, she said, her voice dropping slightly. Mr. Viterei's business often involves sensitive information. What you see, what you hear, stays in this office. Always.
Can you commit to that?
I thought about Marco, about Tyler Hammond, who still called me despite our breakup 8 months ago, about the precarious edge I was balanced on.
Yes.
Absolutely. The hours can be irregular. The demands can be significant. But the compensation reflects that. She named a salary that made my breath catch. It was more than double what the posting had listed. Plus full benefits, and a signing bonus that would be paid out after your first week. The signing bonus alone would handle 1/3 of what I owed Marco. When would I start? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Monday. If Mr. Viterii approves you after this meeting. She stood, smoothing her already perfect suit. One more thing, Nora. Roman Viterii is a complicated man. Brilliant, demanding, and occasionally difficult. But he's also loyal to those who prove themselves trustworthy. This job will challenge you. Are you ready for that? I thought about my camera gathering dust, about the stack of rejection letters from galleries, about the text message promising consequences I didn't want to imagine. I'm ready. Patricia led me down a corridor to a corner office with double doors. She knocked once, waited for acknowledgement, then opened the door and gestured me inside. Mr. Viterii, this is Nora Chen. I stepped into the office, and every carefully prepared greeting died in my throat. Roman Viterii stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, silhouetted against the afternoon light streaming through the glass. He turned as I entered, and I understood immediately why people's voices dropped when they spoke his name. He was tall, easily 6'2", with the kind of build that came from disciplined gym routines rather than vanity. Dark hair cut with precision, not a strand out of place. Sharp jaw shadowed with the barest hint of stubble that somehow made him look more dangerous rather than less polished. But it was his eyes that stopped me cold. Dark, intense, missing nothing as they swept over me with a practiced assessment of someone who automatically cataloged every detail, every potential threat, every weakness. He wore a charcoal suit that had definitely been tailored specifically for him, the fabric moving with fluid precision as he crossed the space between us.
Tom Ford, probably.
Maybe Brioni. My photographer's eye for detail noticed the way the jacket emphasized his shoulders, the way his white shirt was open at the collar revealing tan skin, and the suggestion of muscle beneath. Everything about him radiated controlled power. The kind that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. Our eyes met, and something electric passed through the air between us. Something I couldn't name and definitely shouldn't be feeling in a job interview. Ms. Chen. His voice was deep, with the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't quite place.
Italian, maybe.
Or something from Eastern Europe that had been smoothed over by years of American education. Patricia tells me you're a photographer. Yes, sir. I extended my hand, hoping he couldn't see how it trembled slightly. Fine art portraiture, primarily. But I'm looking for something more stable. He took my hand, his grip firm without being aggressive. His palm was warm, slightly calloused in a way that suggested he did more than push papers. The contact lasted exactly the appropriate amount of time for a professional handshake, yet somehow felt both too long and not long enough. I caught the scent of his cologne. Cedar, leather, something darker underneath that I couldn't identify, but that made my pulse quicken. Why? He didn't release my hand immediately, and I found myself caught in his gaze. Why abandon your art for this? The blunt question caught me off guard. Most interviewers didn't care about the why, only about whether you could do the job. Because art doesn't pay the bills, I said, deciding honesty was my only option. And I have bills that need paying. Something flickered in his expression. Not judgment. Something else. Recognition, maybe. He finally released my hand and gestured to the chair across from his massive desk. Sit. Not an invitation. A command. I sat, noting how the desk was positioned to face the windows, giving him both the view and the psychological advantage of having visitors backlit. Behind him, the city sprawled in afternoon sunshine, making him appear as a silhouette of power against light. Patricia has reviewed your qualifications. I have only one question. He settled into his chair, steepling his fingers as he studied me. This job will require you to see things that might make you uncomfortable, to keep confidences that might test your moral boundaries, to work for someone whose business interests aren't always straightforward.
Can you handle that?
The question was a test. I could feel it, the weight of what he was really asking hanging in the air between us. I thought about Marco's text message, about the kind of men who made their living collecting debts through intimidation and violence, about the fact that I was already neck-deep in a world where moral boundaries were suggestions rather than rules. Mr. Viterii, I said, meeting his intense gaze directly, I'm 24 years old, drowning in debt I didn't create, living in a neighborhood where I triple-check my locks at night, trying to build something from nothing. I stopped having the luxury of simple moral boundaries about 2 years ago. So yes, I can handle it. Silence filled the office for 3 heartbeats. Then Roman Viterii smiled, and it transformed his face from dangerous to devastating. You're hired. Monday, 8:30 a.m. Patricia will handle the paperwork. He stood, our meeting apparently concluded. One more thing, Miss Chen. Yes. In this office, honesty is currency. You just bought yourself a significant amount of credit. Don't waste it. I left his office with my heart racing and the job that would save my life, not yet understanding that I'd just made a deal with someone far more dangerous than Marco could ever be. Monday morning arrived with the weight of last chances and new beginnings. I stood in my cramped bathroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror, trying to see myself the way Roman Vitterii would see me in approximately 45 minutes. The navy pencil skirt I'd chosen was one of my best pieces, falling just above my knee in a length that was professional, conservative, appropriate for a first day at a new job. I'd paired it with a cream silk blouse, buttoned to a respectable height, and simple black heels that added 3 inches to my 5'4" frame. My dark hair was pulled into a low bun, smooth and controlled. Pearl earrings, minimal makeup, a look that said competent professional, without saying anything else. I didn't look like someone whose phone had buzzed at 6 a.m. with another message from Marco, this one more explicit about what would happen if I didn't come through with payment soon. I didn't look desperate or terrified or in over my head. Good. That was the only way to survive this. My camera sat on my desk as I gathered my bag, and I paused to run my fingers over it. The familiar weight, the smooth metal and textured grip, the tool that had been an extension of my vision for years. Now it would gather dust while I answered phones and managed someone else's schedule. Temporary, I whispered to it, to myself, to the universe. This is just temporary. But I didn't quite believe it. The subway was crowded with Monday morning commuters, and I found myself pressed against a pole, breathing in the mixed sense of coffee and cologne and the particular anxiety that comes with the start of a work week. A man's hand brushed my back, and I tensed before realizing it was accidental, just the crush of bodies in a moving train. I was jumpy, too aware of how vulnerable I was, how much rode on making this job work. The Vitterii Holdings building looked different in morning light, less imposing somehow, though no less impressive. I navigated the security checkpoints with my new employee ID, took the elevator to the 28th floor, and stepped out into the executive suite at exactly 8:25 a.m. 5 minutes early. Professional, but not desperately so. Patricia was already at her desk, looking as impeccable as she had during my interview. She smiled when she saw me. Genuine warmth in the expression.
Nora.
Perfect timing. Let me show you to your station. My desk was positioned in an alcove just outside Roman's corner office, arranged so I'd have a clear view of anyone approaching while maintaining some privacy. 2 large monitors, a sleek phone system, and a stack of files waited for my attention. The space smelled like new electronics and expensive carpet, with underlying notes of the same cedar cologne I'd noticed on Roman. Coffee. Patricia gestured to a small break area nearby. There's a machine, but I recommend the cafe 2 blocks away. Roman prefers their blend, and it's part of your morning routine to pick it up for him. Black, no sugar. They know his order. She spent the next hour walking me through systems and protocols, her voice low and professional as she outlined the details that would define my new life. Roman arrived at 9:30 precisely, never late, never early. His schedule was sacred. Everything went through me. Every meeting, every call, every visitor. He didn't like surprises. Personal calls were transferred to his private line without screening. His dry cleaning was picked up Tuesdays and Fridays. Lunch meetings were scheduled for 1 p.m., never earlier, never later. And most importantly, Patricia said, her expression growing serious, discretion. What happens in this office, what you overhear, what you see in his calendar or his files, it stays here. Always. Roman's business involves sensitive information, and trust is everything to him. I nodded, filing away each detail with the same precision I used to plan lighting for a complex shoot. At 9:25, Patricia straightened, smoothing her already perfect suit. He'll be here in 5 minutes. Remember, he appreciates efficiency and professionalism above all else.
You'll do fine.
She left, and I found myself alone with my racing heart and the overwhelming sense that I'd just stepped into water far deeper than I'd understood during my interview. I pulled up Roman's calendar on my computer, familiarizing myself with today's appointments. 10 a.m., meeting with City Planning Commission. 11:30 a.m., call with an architect. 1 p.m., lunch with someone listed only as VM. 3 p.m., another vague entry, warehouse inspection. At exactly 9:30, the elevator chimed. I looked up from my computer, schooling my expression into polite professionalism, and watched Roman Viterii step into the hallway. Photographs from the company website hadn't prepared me. Nothing could have. In the controlled lighting of his office during my interview, he'd been impressive. In morning sunlight streaming through the executive floor windows, he was something else entirely. He wore a navy suit today, the jacket perfectly tailored to his frame, the white shirt beneath it crisp and open at the collar in that way that somehow looked both casual and deliberately controlled. His dark hair was slightly damp, like he'd recently showered, and I caught the scent of his cologne again. Cedar, leather, spice, and something uniquely him that made my breath catch. Our eyes met. His gaze dropped immediately to my skirt, and I watched his expression shift through several emotions too quickly to name. His jaw tightened. His hands, I noticed, clenched briefly at his sides before he consciously relaxed them. Something dark and intense flashed in his eyes before he controlled it, smoothing his features back into professional neutrality. Ms. Chen. His voice was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Viterii. I kept my tone professional, but I didn't look away, didn't duck my head, just met his eyes steadily. Your coffee is on your desk. The City Planning Commission confirmed for 10 o'clock, and I've prepared the files you requested. Efficient. He moved past me toward his office, and I caught the barest hint of tension in his shoulders, the slight stiffness in his posture that suggested he was exercising significant control. Come into my office. Not a request. I grabbed my tablet and a pen, following him into the corner office that was somehow even more impressive than I remembered from my interview. He moved to stand behind his desk but didn't sit, instead bracing his hands on the polished surface and looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. The silence stretched for 3 seconds.
5, 10.
Then he spoke, his voice quiet, almost conversational, but I heard the edge beneath it. Who told you to dress like that? I blinked, genuinely confused. I'm sorry. Your skirt. His eyes dropped to it briefly before returning to my face, and I saw his jaw tighten again. It's inappropriate. Heat flooded my cheeks, equal parts embarrassment and indignation. I looked down at my outfit, which I'd selected specifically for its professionalism. The skirt was navy blue, modest in length, paired with a conservative blouse and sensible heels. Nothing about it was inappropriate. Nothing about it was remotely suggestive or unprofessional. I don't understand, I said, forcing my voice to remain level. This is standard business attire. For a nightclub, perhaps. His voice remained level, but tension radiated from every line of his body. Not for my office. Something sparked in my chest then. Not fear, though maybe it should have been. Not quite anger, though that was part of it. Something else that made me lift my chin instead of ducking my head, made me meet his intense gaze directly instead of looking away. This job was supposed to save me, but I wouldn't let it destroy me either. This skirt is well within professional standards, Mr. Viterii. I kept my voice steady, professional, but I didn't back down. It's neither too short nor too tight. If you have specific dress code requirements beyond standard business formal, I'd be happy to review them. But I won't apologize for wearing something completely appropriate. For a moment, silence filled the office. Roman's eyes narrowed slightly, studying me with renewed intensity. I stood my ground, heart pounding but refusing to show it. I'd dealt with difficult clients before, photographers and gallery owners who tried to use their authority to make women uncomfortable. I wouldn't let this job, no matter how much I needed it, turn me into someone who accepted that behavior without question. You're right. The admission came quietly, surprising me. Roman turned away, moving to the windows that overlooked the city, putting his back to me. With the light streaming around him, some of the tension left his shoulders, though his posture remained rigid. The skirt is professional. I apologize. He was silent for a moment, then continued without looking at me. I have high standards for this office. Sometimes I'm perhaps too particular. Understood, sir. I waited, uncertain if I should leave or stay. The moment felt strange, charged with something I didn't understand. Behind him, the city sprawled in morning light, indifferent to whatever complicated dynamic was playing out in this corner office. He turned back, his expression once again controlled, professional, the man who'd interviewed me returning. Your first task, reschedule my 10 o'clock. Something's come up. Move it to tomorrow, same time. Then order lunch for the 1 o'clock meeting. The usual from yuppies. Of course. Will there be anything else? Not at the moment. He sat finally, pulling his computer toward him in a clear dismissal. Close the door on your way out. I left, pulling the heavy door shut behind me. Only when I was safely back at my desk did I allow myself to really breathe. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the phone to make the necessary calls. What had just happened? The intensity of his reaction to my completely professional outfit. His sudden apology. The way he looked at me like I was both a problem and a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. I should have been upset. Should have been planning my resignation, wondering if this job was worth the obvious complications. Instead, I felt oddly energized. That spark I'd felt when I challenged him, when I refused to immediately back down, it had awakened something in me I hadn't known was sleeping. For the first time in 3 years, since my father died and the debt crashed down on me, I'd felt powerful.
Seen. Real.
I shook my head, trying to clear it, and focused on the work. Rescheduling the city planning meeting took 3 calls and some careful diplomacy. Ordering from yuppies required navigating a host who clearly knew exactly who was calling and treated the request with reverent attention to detail. The morning passed in a flurry of phone calls and emails. I familiarized myself with the filing system, the contact database, the dozens of small details that would make me efficient in this role. Roman emerged from his office twice. Once to grab a file from the cabinet near my desk, his presence filling the space even though he didn't speak. Once to take a call on his private line, his voice too low for me to hear the conversation, but his expression darkening with whatever was being said. Each time, I felt his eyes on me. Brief glances that shouldn't have meant anything but somehow felt weighted with the same intensity as that initial confrontation. At 11:15, a delivery arrived. Not his dry cleaning. Not his lunch. A large boutique shopping bag with tissue paper and a discreet logo I recognized as belonging to one of the city's most exclusive women's clothing stores. The kind of place where a single item cost more than my monthly rent. The delivery woman smiled professionally. For Miss Chun, courtesy of Mr. Viteri. I signed for it automatically, too shocked to do otherwise. Once alone, I pulled aside the tissue paper to reveal a skirt. Designer. I could tell just from the feel of the fabric. Beautiful, in a soft charcoal gray that would coordinate with dozens of blouses. I checked the tag, with trembling fingers. My size exactly. The length was nearly identical to the one I was wearing. A small card nestled in the tissue paper. I opened it to find a single sentence in bold, masculine handwriting. An apology for my poor manners this morning.
RV.
I stared at the skirt, at the card, trying to process what this meant. He'd apologized verbally, then followed it up by buying me expensive clothing that wasn't actually different from what I'd been wearing. Was this a peace offering? A power play? Both. I should return it. Should walk into his office right now and politely decline such an extravagant and inappropriate gift from my brand new employer. But my fingers traced the soft fabric, and I thought about the intensity in his eyes when he'd looked at me. The way something had sparked between us in those charged moments. The fact that he'd noticed my size, had someone purchase and deliver this within hours. Instead of returning it, I carefully folded the skirt back into its tissue paper and placed the bag in my desk drawer. I'd decide what to do with it later. Right now, I had work to focus on. The 1 o'clock lunch meeting brought 3 men in expensive suits who all treated me with careful, impersonal courtesy. They filed into Roman's office, the door closing behind them. Through the heavy wood, I heard only the murmur of voices, nothing distinct. They emerged 90 minutes later, looking satisfied. Whatever business they'd conducted had gone well. Roman walked them to the elevator personally, his hand on each man's shoulder in turn, his smile easy and professional. The moment the elevator doors closed, the smile vanished. He returned to his office without looking at me. At 3 o'clock, he emerged in different clothes. The suit jacket was gone, replaced by a black leather jacket. The white shirt had been rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle, and what I noticed was the edge of a tattoo on his left wrist. The transformation from corporate executive to something more dangerous was startling. "I'll be out for the rest of the day." He was already moving toward the elevator. "Forward any urgent calls to my cell. Everything else can wait until tomorrow." "Of course, Mr. Viteri." I watched him disappear into the elevator, wondering what warehouse inspection actually meant, wondering if I wanted to know. The rest of the afternoon was quiet. I organized files, familiarized myself with various databases and systems, and tried not to think about the skirt in my drawer or the man who'd given it to me. Tried not to think about the way my pulse had jumped when he'd looked at me, or the strange feeling that everything had just become far more complicated than a simple job. At 5:30, I gathered my things, locked my computer, and headed for the elevator. The building was quieter now, most employees already gone for the day. My reflection in the elevator's mirrored walls showed a woman who looked composed, professional, unremarkable. But I felt different, like something had shifted today. Some door had opened that I wasn't sure I knew how to close. Like I'd stepped into a world that was more complex and dangerous than I'd understood when I'd accepted this position. The subway platform was crowded with evening commuters. I found a spot against a pillar, pulling out my phone to mindlessly scroll while waiting for the train. A text came through from an unknown number. "Thank you for your professional handling of today's challenges. You did well for your first day.
RV.
I stared at the message, my heart doing something complicated in my chest. He had my personal number. Of course he did. He probably had access to every detail of my life, background check, and beyond. But the fact that he'd used it, that he'd reached out after hours. I typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on something safe and professional. "Thank you, Mr. Viteri. I look forward to tomorrow." The response came immediately. "Roman. After hours, call me Roman." The train arrived before I could figure out how to respond to that. I tucked my phone away and stepped into the crowded car, my mind already spinning with questions I probably shouldn't be asking. About my new boss. About the intensity I'd felt in his office. About the way something inside me had responded to his attention in a way that was definitely not professional. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow I'd establish better boundaries, maintain appropriate distance, be the perfect professional secretary. Tomorrow I'd return the skirt and politely decline any further personal gestures. But even as I made these promises to myself, I knew I was lying. Because when Roman had looked at me with that intensity, when he'd challenged me and I'd challenged him back, I'd felt more alive than I had in months. More seen, more present in my own skin. And that feeling, dangerous as it might be, was intoxicating. I wore the gray skirt the next morning. The decision happened almost without conscious thought. I told myself it was practical. The skirt was beautiful, expensive, would pair perfectly with the cream blouse I'd planned to wear. Told myself that returning it would be awkward, might insult Roman after his apology. Told myself a dozen reasonable justifications that didn't quite cover the real truth. I wanted to see how he'd react. The subway ride felt longer than yesterday, anticipation coiling in my stomach like a spring wound too tight. I'd spent half the night replaying our interactions, analyzing every word, every look, the intensity in his eyes when he'd criticized my outfit, the way his jaw had tightened, the unexpected apology, both verbal and material, the text message that had shifted our relationship from purely professional to something less defined. "Call me Roman." I turned those words over in my mind until sleep finally claimed me near dawn. What did it mean? Was it simply a powerful man preferring informality after hours? Or was it something else? An invitation into a space that existed outside the normal employer-employee boundaries? The Viteri Holdings building looked different in the early morning light, more imposing somehow. I'd arrived 15 minutes early, wanting to be settled before Roman arrived at his precisely 9:30 routine. Patricia was already at her desk when I emerged from the elevator. Her eyes flickered briefly to my skirt, and something that might have been approval crossed her features. "Good morning, Nora." She handed me a perfectly prepared cappuccino. "How was your first day?" "Educational," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Anything I should know about today's schedule?" "Mr. Viteri has a morning meeting with construction union representatives. Could get contentious." She lowered her voice slightly. "And he's asked that you sit in, take notes." I must have looked surprised because Patricia smiled slightly. "He doesn't usually have his secretary attend meetings, but he specifically requested your presence for this one. Consider it a learning opportunity." Or a test, I thought, sipping the coffee. A chance to see how I handled pressure, conflict, the reality of whatever business Roman actually conducted beyond the corporate facade. At 9:28, I heard the elevator chime. My pulse quickened traitorously as Roman stepped into the hallway, and I hated myself a little for the reaction. He wore navy today, the suit jacket perfectly tailored, the crisp white shirt beneath it open at the collar in that way that somehow looked both casual and deliberately controlled. His dark hair was slightly damp, like he'd recently showered, and I caught a hint of his cologne, cedar and spice and something that was becoming dangerously familiar. Our eyes met. His gaze dropped immediately to my skirt, and I watched his expression shift through several emotions too quickly to name.
His jaw tightened.
His hands clenched briefly at his sides before he consciously relaxed them. When his eyes returned to mine, something dark and possessive flickered in their depths. "Ms. Chen." His voice was carefully neutral, but I heard the strain beneath it. "Good morning." "Good morning, Mr. Viteri." I kept my tone professional, but I didn't look away, didn't duck my head or apologize for wearing his gift. Just met his eyes steadily, letting him see that I'd made a choice. "The skirt suits you." He moved past me toward his office, and I caught the barest hint of tension in his shoulders. "The union representatives will be here in 20 minutes. Bring your tablet." He disappeared into his office, leaving me alone with my racing heart and the knowledge that something had definitely shifted between us. The skirt wasn't just clothing anymore. It was a statement, response to an unspoken question. A piece moved in whatever game we were apparently playing. Patricia appeared at my elbow. He seemed pleased. Did he? I turned to my computer, pulling up the necessary files for the meeting. Roman isn't easy to read, but I've worked for him for 8 years. Trust me, he's pleased. She paused, her expression growing more serious. "Be careful, Nora." I looked up at her, finding genuine concern in her eyes. "Careful of what?" "Roman Viteri is a complicated man. Powerful, brilliant, loyal to those he trusts." She lowered her voice further. "But his world isn't like other people's. The rules are different. The stakes are higher. And getting close to him means accepting things that someone with your background might find difficult." Someone with my background. Translation: someone not born into the subtle violence of organized power. Someone who still believed the world operated according to laws and ethics and clear boundaries between right and wrong. "I understand," I said, even though I wasn't sure I did. "Thank you for the warning." She nodded and left, and I was alone with my thoughts until the elevator chimed again at 9:55. 4 men emerged, all broad-shouldered and thick-necked, wearing suits that looked uncomfortable on their muscular frames. Union representatives, clearly. But there was something else about them. A hardness in their eyes, a way of moving that suggested they were used to physical confrontation. "Gentlemen." I stood, gesturing toward the waiting area. "Mr. Viteri will be with you shortly. Can I offer you coffee?" They settled into the chairs, declining refreshments with curt shakes of their heads. I could feel them assessing me, cataloging me as irrelevant, just another piece of office furniture. I informed Roman of their arrival through the intercom, then gathered my tablet and pen, steeling myself for whatever was about to happen. Roman emerged, his expression pleasant but his eyes sharp. "Gentlemen, thank you for coming." He shook hands with each man, his grip firm, his body language radiating controlled confidence. "Please come in." They filed into his office, and I followed, taking a seat slightly apart from the main cluster of chairs, positioning myself where I could observe without being directly involved. Roman settled behind his desk, the massive piece of furniture giving him both physical and psychological dominance over the room. So, he steepled his fingers, his gaze moving from face to face. We're here to discuss the issues at the Riverside construction site. The largest of the union men leaned forward, his expression aggressive. Issues. That's one word for it. My guys have been getting pressured, told to rush work, skip safety protocols, cut corners. By whom? Roman's voice remained calm, almost curious. Your foreman, DeMarco. The man's jaw tightened. We've filed formal complaints 3 times now. Nothing's changed. I see. Roman pulled a file from his desk, opening it to reveal what looked like detailed reports. These complaints are quite specific about times, dates, witnesses. He looked up, and something cold entered his eyes. Also quite convenient in their timing, coming right as we're negotiating the contract renewal. The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches. The union representative's face darkened. You calling my men liars? I'm noting the timing. Roman closed the file carefully, precisely. And I'm also noting that DeMarco has been with Viterii Holdings for 15 years. 0 safety violations, 0 complaints until 3 weeks ago. That's an interesting pattern, Marcus. I watched, fascinated despite myself, as Roman methodically picked apart each complaint, revealing inconsistencies and convenient gaps in the allegations. He never raised his voice, never displayed obvious anger. Instead, he used facts like surgical instruments, cutting away deception with precise efficiency. My photographers, I cataloged the scene. The way light from the windows illuminated Roman's face, while leaving the union representatives in shadow. The body language of men who'd come expecting intimidation and were instead being outmaneuvered by cold logic. The subtle way Roman's fingers tapped once against his desk, the only sign of the controlled violence simmering beneath his calm exterior. The largest man, Marcus, stood suddenly, his chair scraping back against the floor. We're done here. Sit down, Marcus. Roman's voice didn't change in volume, but something shifted in it. Something cold and absolutely unyielding. We're done. When I say we're done. For a moment, I thought Marcus would refuse. Violence seemed to shimmer in the air like heat waves, and I understood with sudden clarity that Roman had positioned me here deliberately.
He wanted me to see this.
To understand what his world really looked like. Then, slowly, Marcus sat. Not because he wanted to, but because something in Roman's eyes made it clear that refusing wasn't actually an option. Here's what's going to happen, Roman continued, his tone conversational again, as if the moment of naked threat had never occurred. You're going to drop these manufactured complaints. I'm going to pretend I don't know that Castellano put you up to this, trying to leverage labor issues to force me to sell him the Riverside property. Marcus's face went pale, confirming what Roman already knew. In exchange, Roman said, sliding a document across the desk, I'll increase the pension contribution by 3% and guarantee no layoffs through the end of next year. The contract renewal will be signed with these terms. He tapped the paper. Your men get better benefits, better security. All you have to do is stop being a pawn in someone else's game. I watched Marcus read the document, saw greed and fear war across his features. Roman waited patiently, a chess master who already knew how this would end. How do we know Castellano won't? Marcus trailed off, the unspoken threat hanging in the air. Because I'll make it clear to him that you're under my protection now. Roman's smile didn't reach his eyes. And Castellano, for all his ambitions, isn't stupid enough to move against people I've claimed. The word claimed echoed in my head. The casual way Roman said it, like ownership was a simple fact of his existence. Like protection and control were two sides of the same coin. Marcus signed. The other men followed suit. Within 10 minutes, they were filing out of the office, their aggression replaced with the careful deference of people who knew they'd just dodged a bullet they hadn't seen coming. When the elevator doors closed behind them, Roman finally looked at me. Your thoughts? I should have been horrified. Should have been already planning my resignation, understanding that I'd just watched something that operated far outside the boundaries of legal business practices. Instead, I found myself analyzing what I'd witnessed with an objectivity that probably said something concerning about my own moral boundaries. "You knew about Castellano before they walked in," I said. "Always know your opponent's moves before they make them." He stood, moving to the windows, silhouetted against the morning light. "And always give people a reason to choose you over whoever's threatening them. Carrot and stick, Ms. Chun. The foundation of negotiation." That wasn't negotiation. That was— I trailed off, uncertain what word fit. That was business. My business. He turned to face me, and I saw something like challenge in his expression. The kind you'll see more of if you stay in this position. "The question is whether you can handle it." I met his eyes, feeling that same spark from yesterday igniting again. "You already know I can. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had me in that room." Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I wanted to give you the chance to walk away now, before you're in too deep. Is that what you want? For me to walk away?" The question emerged before I could stop it, carrying implications far beyond the professional. Roman's eyes darkened, and the air between us suddenly felt charged with the same intensity as yesterday. "What I want," he said quietly, "and what's wise are often very different things." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression shifting to something harder. "I need to take this. We'll continue this conversation later." Dismissed again, I returned to my desk, my mind spinning with everything I'd just witnessed and heard. The morning had revealed several things. First, Roman's business operated in spaces where legal and illegal blurred until the distinction became meaningless. Second, he wielded power with surgical precision, using information and leverage like weapons. Third, he'd wanted me to see this, to understand what working for him really meant. And fourth, most dangerously, none of it had scared me away. The rest of the morning passed in a flurry of calls and administrative tasks. I fielded questions from contractors, scheduled meetings, managed the constant flow of information that seemed to pour through my desk. Around 11:30, I realized I was starving. I'd been too nervous this morning to eat breakfast. I was reaching for my bag to grab the granola bar I'd packed when the office door opened, and Patricia appeared, her expression concerned. "Nora, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's insisting it's personal." My stomach dropped. "Who?" "He says his name is Tyler Hammond. Claims he's your boyfriend." "Ex-boyfriend." The correction died on my lips as fear clawed at my throat. Tyler was here. At my workplace. After 8 months of me ignoring his calls and texts and increasingly aggressive attempts to contact me. "I can have security remove him," Patricia said quietly. "Roman wouldn't want anyone making you uncomfortable." But I could already see Tyler through the glass walls of the conference room where Patricia must have told him to wait. Tall, blonde, wearing the kind of expensive casual clothes that screamed old money. Prep school educated, yacht club member, the kind of guy who'd never been told no in his life and didn't understand the word when he finally heard it. "It's fine," I heard myself say. "I'll talk to him. Just, can you stay nearby?" Patricia's expression tightened, but she nodded. I walked to the conference room on legs that felt disconnected from my body, my photographer's brain automatically noting details. The way Tyler stood with his back to the window, using the light to his advantage. The aggressive set of his shoulders. The smile that didn't reach his eyes when he saw me. I stepped inside, leaving the door open. "Tyler, what are you doing here?" "There you are, babe." He moved toward me, and I instinctively took a step back. "You've been avoiding my calls. We broke up 8 months ago, Tyler. You need to leave." "Broke up?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You don't get to break up with me, Nora. Nobody leaves me." He grabbed my wrist, his grip too tight, painful. I tried to pull away, but he yanked me closer, and suddenly we were too close, his cologne, expensive but cloying, making me nauseous. "Let go of me. Not until we talk." His other hand slid up my arm, possessive, threatening. "I know about your debt, Nora. I know about Marco's collectors. Maybe I help them find you. Maybe I make a deal with them." Fear turned my blood to ice. How did he know about Marco? Had he been following me? Watching me? Or maybe, he continued, his voice dropping to something that was supposed to be seductive but came out predatory, you come back to me. Be a good girl like you used to be. I'll take care of everything. The debt, the job you're clearly terrible at, all of it. You just need to remember your place. His fingers dug into my arm hard enough to bruise, and I opened my mouth to scream, to fight, to do something. Take your hands off her.
Now.
The voice came from behind me, quiet and deadly, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Tyler turned, saw who was standing in the doorway, and I watched recognition flicker across his face. Viterii. This is private. Roman crossed the space between us in 2 strides. He grabbed Tyler's wrist with one hand, applying pressure I could see in the way Tyler's face went white until Tyler released me with a yelp of pain. She's under my protection now. Roman's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more threat than any shout. You don't touch what's mine. You don't speak to her. You don't think about her. He twisted Tyler's arm behind his back with practiced efficiency, the movement so smooth and controlled that I knew he'd done this before. Many times. He walked Tyler toward the door, and I saw Patricia step aside, her expression carefully neutral. If I see you near this building, near her apartment, near her at all, Roman continued, his voice still that same deadly quiet, they won't find enough of you to identify. Understood? You can't. I'll call the police. Roman leaned in close, and whatever he whispered in Tyler's ear made my ex-boyfriend's face go from white to gray. Tyler nodded frantically, all his prep school bravado evaporating. Roman released him at the elevator with enough force that Tyler stumbled. The doors opened, Tyler fled inside, and Roman stood watching until the elevator descended. Then he turned back to me. I was shaking, adrenaline flooding my system now that the immediate threat was gone. My wrist throbbed where Tyler had grabbed me, and I could see the red marks already forming, the promise of bruises to come. Roman's expression when he saw those marks was frightening in its cold fury. My office.
Now.
Not a request. Not even really a command. Just a statement of fact about what would happen next. I followed him on unsteady legs, aware of Patricia's concerned gaze, aware of how the other executives on the floor had suddenly found reasons to be anywhere but watching this unfold. Inside Roman's office, he closed the door and gestured to the couch along the far wall, a seating area I hadn't noticed before. Sit. I sat, and he moved to a small bar cart in the corner, pouring something amber into a crystal glass. Whiskey, probably. He brought it to me, pressing it into my trembling hands. Drink. I obeyed, the liquid burning down my throat, shocking warmth spreading through my chest. He stood over me, jaw tight, hands clenched at his sides like he was physically restraining himself from violence. How long has he been bothering you? Since the breakup. 8 months. My voice came out steadier than I felt. He doesn't take no well. And the debt he mentioned? I hesitated, staring at the whiskey in my glass. This was it. The moment where I could lie, could maintain some illusion of having my life together, or I could tell the truth and step fully into whatever world Roman occupied. Marco's text message flashed through my mind. 72 hours. Now down to 48. My father had a gambling problem, I said quietly. Before he died, he took out loans. Put my name on the papers. I was 17, didn't understand what I was signing. I took another sip of whiskey. He died 3 years ago, and the debt transferred to me. $47,000. I've been paying what I can, but the interest keeps growing, and the collectors are getting impatient. This Marco Tyler mentioned? Marco Santino. Loan shark operating out of the East Side. He's given me 72 hours to come up with the full amount or... I stopped, not wanting to say out loud what Marco had implied would happen. Roman was silent for a long moment, studying me with an intensity that made me feel stripped bare. Every defense gone. Why didn't you tell me this during your interview? Would it have mattered? Yes. He moved to his desk, leaning against it, arms crossed. It would have saved us both time. I looked up at him, confused. I don't understand. I've been trying to figure out how to offer you an arrangement without seeming like I was taking advantage of your obvious desperation. His expression was unreadable. Now I don't have to be subtle about it. An arrangement? I'll handle it. All of it. The debt, the collectors, your ex-boyfriend who apparently has a death wish. He said it matter-of-factly, like he was discussing lunch orders. I'll pay off every cent you owe Marco Santino. I'll make sure Tyler Hammond never comes near you again. I'll provide security, housing if you need it, anything to keep you safe. My heart hammered against my ribs. Why would you do that? Because I'm making you an offer, Nora. A business arrangement. He stood, moving to the windows, silhouetted against the city sprawling below. I'll pay off your debt. I'll handle your ex. I'll make sure no one ever threatens you or uses you as leverage again. In exchange, you work exclusively for me. You stay close. You let me protect you. I processed this, trying to understand what he was really offering, what the catch was. Because there was always a catch. You come to events as my date when required, he continued. You trust my judgment about your safety. And you don't question how I handle threats to what's mine. There was that word again.
Mine.
You're buying me, I said, the words coming out flat. I'm offering you a solution to an impossible problem. He turned to face me, and I saw something fierce in his expression. The terms are negotiable, but the core isn't. You accept my protection, or you face Marco's collectors in 48 hours. Your choice. This is insane. This is survival. I stood, needing to move, to think. My wrist throbbed where Tyler had grabbed me. My head spun from whiskey and adrenaline and the overwhelming sense that I was about to make a decision that would change everything. If I agree, I said slowly, how long does this arrangement last? Until the threats are gone. Until you're safe. And if I want out before then? Then you walk away. His eyes never left mine. I won't stop you. He was lying. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened, in the possessive edge that entered his voice when he talked about my safety. If I agreed to this, if I let him into my life in this way, walking away wouldn't be simple. Might not even be possible. But the alternative was Marco. Was Tyler, who now knew where I worked and would be back with more leverage, more threats. Was drowning in debt that would follow me forever, destroying any chance of building the life I wanted. If I agree to your terms, I said carefully, I want things in writing. A contract. Clear boundaries about what this arrangement means. Something that might have been respect flickered in Roman's eyes. Smart. I'd expect nothing less. He moved to his desk, opening a drawer and pulling out papers that looked like they'd been prepared in advance. Of course they had. He'd been planning this, waiting for the right moment. Read it, he said, sliding the document across the desk. Everything's outlined. I pay your debt in full. I provide security and protection. You work for me exclusively, attend events as required, and accept my judgment about threats to your safety. Term is 6 months minimum, renewable if both parties agree. Salary triple what you're making now, plus housing in one of my buildings if you want it. I read through the contract with the same attention to detail I'd use checking a shoot location contract. Everything was there, spelled out in legal language that somehow made this sound almost reasonable. Almost legitimate. At the bottom was a line for my signature. You had this prepared already, I said. I've been watching you since your interview, Nora. The way you carry yourself, the way you don't back down, the intelligence in your eyes. He came around the desk to stand beside me. I knew I wanted you close. The debt and the ex-boyfriend just accelerated the timeline. You're very sure of yourself. I'm sure of what I see. And I see someone who's drowning and too proud to ask for help. Someone who needs what I can provide. Someone who, whether she wants to admit it or not, is attracted to what I am. He wasn't wrong. That was the terrifying part. Standing here in his office, my wrists still throbbing from Tyler's grip, Marco's deadline ticking down in my head, I should have been planning my escape from both of them. Instead, I was considering signing a contract that would bind me to a man whose business operated in shadows, whose protection came with strings I couldn't even see yet, whose eyes promised things that definitely weren't in the written agreement. This is insane, I whispered. So you keep saying. Roman's voice was softer now, and he reached out to gently examine my bruised wrist. His touch was surprisingly careful, at odds with the violence I'd seen him capable of minutes ago. But tell me, Nora, what's the alternative? Marco's collectors? Tyler coming back with more threats? Spending the rest of your life looking over your shoulder? He had a point. A logical, terrible point. I picked up the pen he'd left on the contract. If I sign this, I'm trusting you to keep your word, to actually handle Marco and Tyler, to not make this worse than it already is. You have my word. What's mine, I protect. Always. My hand trembled slightly as I signed my name on the line, the scratch of pen on paper somehow too loud in the quiet office. When I set the pen down, I felt like I'd just stepped off a cliff, not knowing if I'd fall or fly. Roman countersigned, then pulled out his phone, making a call that was answered immediately. Marcus, I need you to handle something. He rattled off Marco Santino's information. How did he already know all of this, along with instructions to settle my debt in full by end of business today? And make it clear that Miss Chun is under Veterii protection now. Anyone who approaches her answers to me. He hung up, then made another call. This one about Tyler Hammond, and I didn't listen too closely to what he said, not wanting to know exactly how he planned to encourage my ex to leave the city. When he finished, he looked at me with something I couldn't quite read in his expression. It's done. Marco will have his money by 5 p.m. Tyler will be on a plane to California by tomorrow. And you? He reached out, tilting my chin up with one finger, so I had to meet his eyes. You're mine now, Nora. I protect what's mine. The possessive language should have felt threatening. Instead, standing there with his finger under my chin, his dark eyes intense on mine, I felt something else entirely. Something warm and dangerous and completely inappropriate for what was supposedly a business arrangement. What happens now? I asked. Now you go back to your desk. You do your job. And tonight, Marcus will move your essentials to a secure apartment in one of my buildings. His thumb stroked once across my jaw before he dropped his hand. Tomorrow, we establish new routines. But today you're safe. That's what matters. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and left his office on shaky legs. Back at my desk, I stared at my computer screen without seeing it, my mind replaying everything that had just happened. Tyler's attack. Roman's cold fury. The contract I'd signed. The feeling of his thumb against my jaw. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but I knew who it was. The debt's handled. Marco won't bother you again. Neither will Tyler. I stared at the message, at the impossible speed with which he'd solved problems that had been suffocating me for years. 6 hours. He'd handled in 6 hours what I'd been drowning in for 3 years. I typed back. Thank you. His response was immediate. You're welcome. Now breathe, Nora. You're safe. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I actually believed it. That evening, movers arrived at my cramped studio apartment at exactly 6 p.m. I'd barely walked through my door when they knocked, and I opened it to find 3 men in Veterii Holdings uniforms and Marcus, Roman's head of security, supervising. Miss Chun. Marcus was in his 50s, built like he'd spent a career in military special forces, with a face that had seen violence and emerged harder for it. Mr. Veterii has arranged for you to relocate to more secure housing. We'll move your essentials tonight. The rest can be handled over the next few days. I looked at my tiny apartment, at the life I'd built here through sheer stubbornness and desperation, and felt something twist in my chest. This was happening. Really happening. In the span of 8 hours, my entire world had shifted. Where am I going? The Meridian Tower. Penthouse level. Mr. Veterii owns the building. Marcus's expression softened slightly. You'll be safe there, Miss Chun. Best security in the city. The movers worked with practiced efficiency, wrapping my photography equipment with a care that told me Roman had given specific instructions about its importance. My clothes, my books, the few personal items I'd accumulated, everything was packed and loaded within an hour. I stood in my empty apartment, looking at the water stains on the ceiling, the scratched hardwood floors, the windows that never quite closed all the way. I'd lived here for 3 years, fighting and scraping to keep this tiny piece of independence. Now I was leaving it behind for a gilded cage I'd agreed to occupy. This is insane, I whispered to the empty room. But I followed Marcus to the elevator anyway. The Meridian Tower was everything my building wasn't. Gleaming, modern, with a lobby that looked like a 5-star hotel and security that included facial recognition and key card access at every level. Marcus escorted me to the penthouse elevator, which required a special code to access. "You're on the 29th floor," he said as we rose. "Mr. Viteri is on the 30th. There's a private stairway connecting the 2 levels, but it's locked from your side unless you engage the release. Your privacy is respected." The doors opened directly into the apartment, and I stepped into a space that made my breath catch. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, the lights beginning to sparkle as evening deepened into night. The furniture was modern and expensive: leather sofa, sleek dining table, a kitchen with appliances I'd only seen in magazines. Everything was done in grays and whites and blacks, masculine but not oppressively so.
Clean.
Controlled. Beautiful. "Your bedroom is through there." Marcus gestured to a hallway. "The movers will set up your equipment wherever you like. There's a spare room that would work well as a photography studio if you want it." He'd thought of that. Roman had specifically arranged for me to have space for my art, even though I was here because of a contract, an arrangement, a transaction dressed up as protection. After Marcus and the movers left, I explored the apartment alone, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. The bedroom was larger than my entire previous apartment, with a bed that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel and a bathroom with a soaking tub and rainfall shower. My clothes looked lost in the massive walk-in closet. The spare room had north-facing windows, perfect light for a studio. My equipment was already set up there, waiting, as if he knew I'd need that space to breathe, to create, to maintain some piece of who I was before this. I stood at the windows in the main room, looking out at the city sprawling below, and my phone rang. Not a text this time. An actual call from a number I recognized now as Roman's private line. "Hello. Are you settled?" His voice was lower than in the office, intimate in a way that made my skin prickle with awareness. Yes. This apartment is." I struggled for words. "It's too much. It's secure. That's what matters." I heard the sound of ice clinking in a glass, imagined him in his own apartment 1 floor above, probably at similar windows looking at the same view. Did Marcus explain the security features?
Yes.
Key card access, private elevator, panic button in every room. I noticed those small red buttons placed discreetly throughout the apartment, a reminder that safety here required the expectation of danger. Good. Use them if you need to. Marcus and his team are always available.
He paused.
"How are you feeling?" The question surprised me, with its apparent genuine concern. Overwhelmed. Like my life just changed faster than I can process. It did. He was quiet for a moment. "If this is too much, if you want to revisit the terms."
No.
The word came out sharper than I intended. "No. I signed the contract. I agreed to this. I'm just adjusting. Take the time you need. There's food in the refrigerator." Marcus had it stocked.
Sleep.
"Tomorrow we establish the new normal." Roman. I used his first name deliberately, testing the boundary. "Yes. Thank you. For today. For handling Tyler and Marco. For this." I gestured to the apartment even though he couldn't see me. "I know it's part of the arrangement, but still. Thank you." "You're welcome, Nora." The way he said my name made something warm unfurl in my chest. "Sleep well. I'll see you at 9:30. He hung up, and I was alone with the city lights and the overwhelming reality of what I'd agreed to.
I didn't sleep well that night.
How could I, in a bed too big and too comfortable, in an apartment that smelled of new carpet and expensive furniture instead of my own familiar scents? Every sound made me tense, convinced that Marco, or Tyler, had somehow found me despite Roman's promises. But morning came without incident, and I dressed for work in the gray skirt and a different blouse, pulling my hair back with hands that were steadier than yesterday. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of adjustment and integration. True to his word, Roman stopped hiding the nature of his business from me. I sat in on meetings that ranged from completely legitimate real estate deals to discussions that were clearly anything but legal. I learned the language of his empire. The euphemisms, the coded phrases, the careful dance of power and violence wrapped in corporate speak. I saw him negotiate with city officials, his donations to their campaigns buying influence that was never explicitly stated but clearly understood. I watched him handle a problem with a rival organization, the resolution involving enough implied threat that actual violence was unnecessary. I fielded calls from people whose names I recognized from news reports about organized crime, and I scheduled meetings in his calendar that had no official titles, just times and locations. And through it all, I took photographs. Not for work. Not for any reason except that I needed to. My camera became my way of processing this new world, of finding beauty in the darkness Roman operated within. I photographed his hands during meetings, strong, scarred knuckles, fingers that could sign contracts or break bones with equal efficiency. I captured the way light fell through his office windows at different times of day. I shot candid moments of his men, Marcus with his watchful eyes, Antonio the driver with his easy smile, faces that had seen violence but also showed loyalty and something like honor. One evening, working late, Roman came to my desk and found me reviewing the photos on my computer. "May I?" He gestured to the screen. I nodded, feeling oddly vulnerable as he leaned over to look. He was close enough that I could smell his cologne, feel the heat radiating from his body. He scrolled through slowly, studying each image with the same intensity he brought to business negotiations. "You're talented. It's just a hobby now." Bitterness crept into my voice despite my attempt to control it. "Why did you stop pursuing it professionally?" "Same reason anyone stops pursuing dreams. Life got expensive. Reality intruded." I closed the laptop, uncomfortable with how much my photographs revealed, not just of his world, but of how I saw him. "It doesn't matter now." He was quiet for a moment then. "You see beauty in darkness. That's rare. Is that what this is? Beautiful?" I gestured vaguely at his office, at the empire he'd built.
No.
"It's brutal and corrupt and violent." He straightened, putting professional distance between us again. "But you find the light anyway. In my hands, in faces of men who've done terrible things, in moments between the violence. That's a gift, Nora." Before I could respond, his phone rang with whatever crisis required his attention, and the moment passed. But his words stayed with me. "Found the light anyway."
Was that what I was doing?
Or was I just documenting my own descent into a world where morality was negotiable and protection came at the cost of complicity? Patricia pulled me aside one afternoon during my second week, guiding me to the empty conference room with a gentle but firm hand. "We need to talk," she said once the door was closed. About Roman. About you. About what's clearly developing between you two." Her expression was serious, almost maternal. "I've worked for him for 8 years, Nora. I've seen a lot of women come into his orbit. You're different. I'm his secretary. That's all. Don't insult my intelligence." She sat, gesturing for me to do the same. "I see how he looks at you. How you look at him. The arrangement you have, it might have started as business, but it's becoming something else. And you need to understand what that means." "I'm listening." Roman's last serious relationship ended 3 years ago. Her name was Victoria Castellano, yes, related to the family giving him trouble now. She was beautiful, sophisticated, from the right background. She understood his world. My stomach tightened. What happened? She tried to use him. Passed information to her family, thinking she could play both sides. Thinking he wouldn't find out. Patricia's expression hardened. Roman found out. He always finds out. He exposed her to her own family, let them know she'd been compromised by getting emotionally involved with him. The Castellanos dealt with her internally. What does that mean? It means Victoria left the city with a permanent limp and a healthy fear of crossing anyone with power. Last I heard, she's in Europe living under a new name. Patricia leaned forward. Roman swore he'd never let anyone that close again. Never trust someone enough to make him vulnerable. And yet here you are, wearing skirts he buys you, living in his building, seeing the parts of his business he usually hides. You're becoming an exception, Nora. That makes you both powerful and incredibly vulnerable. I processed this, understanding the warning beneath her words. You think I'm going to betray him like she did?
No.
Actually, I think you're different. I think you actually see him as a person, not as a means to an end. But that might be worse. How is that worse? Because if he lets himself care about you, really care, and something happens to you or you leave, or this arrangement ends badly. She trailed off, shaking her head. Roman doesn't handle loss well, and people he cares about become targets, vulnerabilities that enemies exploit. Like Victoria. Victoria was calculating from the beginning. You're not. That makes you dangerous in a completely different way. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. I'm not telling you to run. I'm telling you to be aware. His world isn't kind to innocents. The last woman he cared about ended up broken. Are you prepared for what might happen if you continue down this path? I thought about Tyler's hands on me, about Roman's cold fury, about the way something had sparked between us from that first confrontation over my skirt, about how I was already in deeper than I'd intended, already seeing beauty in his darkness, already responding to his possessive attention in ways that had nothing to do with our contract. I don't know, I admitted. But I'm not running. Patricia nodded slowly. Then be careful. And Nora?
Don't ever lie to him.
Don't ever make him question your loyalty. That's the one thing he can't forgive. After she left, I sat alone in the conference room, thinking about Victoria with her limp and her fear, about Roman's capacity for both protection and ruthlessness, about how I was falling for someone who operated outside every boundary I'd once believed in. And instead of being terrified, I felt something else entirely.
Alive.
The invitation arrived on my desk on Friday afternoon of my third week. Thick cream cardstock, embossed lettering, the kind of formal announcement that belonged to a world I'd only photographed from outside. The Lexington Foundation Annual Charity Gala requests the honor of your presence. With it was a note in Roman's bold handwriting. The foundation requires my attendance. I need someone I trust to accompany me. Dress will be provided. Saturday, 7 p.m. I stared at the invitation, understanding what he was really asking. This wasn't just about attending an event. This was about going public, about me appearing at his side in front of the entire elite of the city, about crossing a line from private arrangement to public declaration. Patricia appeared at my desk, her expression knowing. He sent you the gala invitation. Is this normal? Does he usually take his secretary to these things? He usually goes alone. Or occasionally with women who understand it's purely for appearance's sake. She smiled slightly. He's never specifically requested anyone the way he's requesting you. You should know, Isabella Castellano will be there. And her father. The entire social hierarchy of the city will be watching. This is insane.
Probably.
Are you going? I thought about declining, about maintaining boundaries, about protecting myself from whatever complicated game was playing out between Roman and me. Then I thought about how he'd handled Tyler, how he'd paid my debt without hesitation, how he'd looked at my photographs and seen beauty where I'd only documented darkness. I stood, smoothing my skirt, the gray one he'd given me, which I wore more often than I should, and walked to his office door.
Knocked softly.
Come in. He was at his desk, reviewing contracts, but he looked up when I entered. Even after 3 weeks, the intensity of his gaze still made my breath catch. I accept. The gala. Something like satisfaction crossed his features, quickly controlled. Good. Patricia will coordinate the details. I should have left then. Should have maintained professional distance. But instead I heard myself ask, why me? You could take anyone to this event. Someone from your world. Someone who understands the rules. He stood, moving around his desk toward me, and I found myself backing up slightly until I hit the closed door behind me. He stopped close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. That's exactly why not them. His voice was lower, more intimate than his office voice. I'm tired of people who understand the rules of my world. Tired of relationships built on leverage and alliance. Tired of women who see a name and a bank account instead of a person. He reached up, tucking a strand of hair that had escaped my bun behind my ear, and the casual intimacy of the gesture made my pulse race. You look at me like I'm a person, Nora. Not a position or a power base.
You challenge me.
You don't back down even when you probably should. Do you have any idea how rare that is? You are a person, I said softly. A complicated one. A dangerous one. But still just a person. Just a person. He smiled without humor. No one's called me that in a long time. His thumb traced my jawline, the touch light but possessive.
Saturday.
7 p.m. Patricia will handle everything. Okay. One more thing. His dark eyes held mine. At this gala, people will make assumptions about us.
About what you are to me.
Let them. Don't correct them. Don't explain. Just stay close and let me handle anyone who makes you uncomfortable. Understood. I nodded, not trusting my voice.
Good.
But he didn't step back, didn't move away, just continued looking at me with that intensity that made it hard to breathe. This is dangerous. What's developing between us? You know that. I know. We should maintain professional boundaries. Stick to the terms of the contract. We should. But I don't want to. The admission came roughly, like it cost him something to say it. I haven't wanted to since the moment you challenged me about that skirt. Since you refused to be intimidated. Since you showed me your photographs and I saw how you find light in darkness. My heart hammered against my ribs. Roman. His phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He stepped back, professional distance returning as he pulled out the device and glanced at the screen. Whatever he saw there made his expression harden. I need to handle this. Saturday, Nora. Be ready. I left his office on shaky legs, feeling like I'd just narrowly avoided something, or missed an opportunity for something I wasn't sure I was ready for anyway.